My name is Lena Kollender. I'm curator for performing arts as well as part of the curatorial team for this conference. I'm a white woman with short blonde hair, and I'm wearing a rusty brown reddish shirt. And I'm standing here at P1 on the stage at Kampnagel in a hybrid setting. In the back of me I have a big screen. I have to say I'm very excited and honored and also a little proud that we managed to bring together so many brilliant, inspiring activists, artists, speakers from Uganda, Canada, Brazil, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and the US, who will join us over the next 2.5 days via the screen and live here on stage, and share discussions, ideas, and transfeminist, decolonial, indigenous, African futurist visions for artificial intelligence, algorithms, and codes. I'm even more excited because from quite an early point on, this has started as a collaboration across continents, as well as perspectives and expertise, together with the wonderful sociologist of technology, Fiona Krakenbürger, and the brilliant consultant and scientist, Lorena Jaume Palasí. We decided quite early on that we would not want to discuss the impact of and new visions for those technologies from our limited European perspectives. Because here the debate about artificial intelligence, technologies, codes, and algorithmic systems usually centers around questions of efficiency and technical progressiveness. Rarely we talk about resilience, sustainability, and the realities we create with them across the globe and for different, especially marginalized communities. So we invited Joana Baron and Lucia Egaña Rojas from the South American initiatives Coding Rights and Musea Mami, as well as Susan Kite from the Indigenous AI Working Group, to curate program tracks within this event, which you will see unfold over the next days. And I'm very excited to be a guest in their sessions, actually. They have done quite amazing work, and I could not be more thankful to all of you, Lorena, Fiona, Joana, Lucia, and Suzanne, for sharing your knowledge with me and finally all of us. I've already learned so much from all of you, and I hope that we can give our audience a glimpse of that within the next days. But all of this would also not have been possible without the support of the Allianz Kulturstiftung, the Nemetschek Stiftung, the Gunda Werner Institut and the Heinrich Böll Stiftung, and Wikimedia Deutschland, who have trusted us with this collective experiment to curate with 5 people such an event. They're curious and also very last-minute support. Thank you for that. Yeah, some practical information for our audience now. If you want to ask questions during the panels, you can use the phone number, which is printed on the evening sheets for those here on site, as well as in the live stream. You will see it right now, I hope. And you can just use any messenger app and send your questions to that number, or if you're here live at Kampnagel, you can step to the microphone and just ask the question, once you're asked to, of course. Please keep your masks on always and cover your nose as well as your mouth here inside. And in between the sessions, we would ask you to leave the room and come back in time for the next session. Finally, I have the honor to introduce our hosts for the following days, the co-moderators, Lorena Jaume Palasí and Tembi Wolf. Lorena Jaume Palasí is, as I said, a crucial part of the curatorial team to create this conference. She's a consultant and scientist, and in this role she moves in the field of tension between digital technology and ethics. As an expert, Lorena works for the European Parliament and the European Commission, and the government of her home country, Spain, appointed her to the National Council on Artificial Intelligence. She's currently involved in the non-profit organization she founded, the Ethical Tech Society. There she explores the question of how ethics and legal philosophy can be reconciled with digitalization. As a co-founder of the Algorithm Watch initiative, she received the Theodor Heuss Medal in 2018 for her contribution to a differentiated view of algorithms and their mechanisms of actions. Tembi Wolf is a senior editor at Vice magazine and part of the journalist collective Collect Text. She writes and produces long-form features from Germany, Southern Europe, and Africa on politics, society, and economy. Tembi gives lectures on media ethics and diversity in journalism, co-chairs the Neue Deutsche MedienmacherInnen, the largest network of journalists of color in Germany. Thank you very much. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Lena, for your kind words. It was a pleasure and an honor to work with you. And I have also learned a lot from you, Fiona, Lucia, Joanna, Lena, and Suzanne. The Future of Code Politics is a 3-day festival that will be taking European knowledge, power, and peoples out of center stage, which is its global default position. Code, artificial intelligence, like the air we breathe, is invisible to us. It is only when the air becomes poisonous or unbeneficial to oneself, or it is lacking fully, when we become aware of it. This also applies for the computer algorithms and data that shape our current infrastructures and will shape our future infrastructures. The water, electricity we use, the streetlights, or our banking systems, the health systems, and the cars we drive, as many other things, are all shaped by computational systems. As long as it benefits our communities, we don't see how it harms others. These systems are socio-technical systems. They are based on social assumptions from the past and the present, and are used to shape our futures. Code cannot detach itself from culture. Those cultures shaping code, cultures of oppression or of respect and dignity. These infrastructures will only be free and legitimate if they are free and beneficial for all, including the planet and all other living beings. So in the next 3 days, like archaeologists, we will analyze the thinking, the peoples, and the power enshrined in those systems, and imagine visions based on the knowledge, peoples, and authority from indigenous and transfeminist communities. This festival, to quote one of the keynote speakers at the festival, the African futurist writer Nnedi Okorafor, this festival is about understanding that it's not always about oneself. And not being about oneself can be a lot about oneself. I am very much looking forward to our opening panel with 2 very impressive women who are breaking walls and boundaries in their fields, teaching us how everything is connected to each other. We have Timnit Gebru, who is one of the most prominent researchers working in artificial intelligence and ethics. She has co-founded the Black in AI Affinity Group and champions diversity in the tech industry. Gebru has co-authored groundbreaking papers showing how computer vision can perpetuate inequality. Her work has challenged mainstream practices in the field of artificial intelligence and set new standards. Last year, her warnings became inconvenient truths for her employer, Google. In December, after Gebru questioned the company's commitment to diversity and was asked to withdraw a research paper she had co-authored about the environmental risks of large language models on artificial intelligence trained on huge amounts of text, Google forced her out.
And also joining us on our opening panel is Vanessa Nakate, one of the best-known activists against global warming of her generation. She's at the forefront of the Fridays for Future's fight for climate justice. And in fact, she was the first activist of Fridays for Future in Uganda, her home country. And she also founded the Rise Up climate movement there. Vanessa spearheaded the campaign against deforestation in the Congo rainforest. And last year she made headlines, you may have seen, because she was one of 20 climate activists who traveled to Davos to call on participants of the World Economic Forum to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. Vanessa's work is dedicated to amplify African voices in the climate discourse. And in November, we will be able to read all about that fight when her book appears, her first book, which is called A Bigger Picture, My Fight to Bring a New African Voice to the Climate Crisis. It's a great honor and joy to open the festival with a conversation between two fierce women fighting for more justice in both the technological and the environmental field. I hope that in our conversation we'll be able to join two fields that might seem a bit unconnected. We might be able to tie issues that seem unrelated, tech and the environment. But we will do that by talking about environmental racism, sexism, and justice, and the role of technology and all of that. We'll be talking about extractivism and transgenerational justice in the context of artificial intelligence and new technologies. We will open the conversation for questions about in the second half of the session. And for the ones in the room, you will be able to ask questions by stepping to the mic. Please keep your masks on while doing that. And for the audience joining us online, you can place your questions via Messenger by the number we should be showing you right now. You'll be able to text by any messenger that you prefer to use. Right now, we will start with two keynotes. Vanessa Nakate will start by talking. She will give us a short input, and then Timnit Gebru will react to it. I would ask you to, for our hearing-impaired audience, to start by introducing yourselves a bit by talking about your appearance and the room you are in. Thank you very much. Please, Vanessa and Timnit.
Thank you so much, and I'm so happy to be speaking with all of you today, especially with the wonderful Timnit. I'm in my room right now. As you can see, it's a white background with some butterflies on the wall, and in front of me, I can see my bed. So, hi again. My name is Vanessa Nakate, and I'm a climate justice activist from Kampala, Uganda, a country that has one of the fastest changing climates in the world. In the past few years, I have seen more and more how the climate crisis is affecting the African continent, which is ironic given that Africa is the lowest emitter of CO2 emissions of all continents except for Antarctica. Historically, the continent of Africa is responsible for only 3% of global emissions, and yet Africans are already suffering some of the most brutal impacts fueled by the climate crisis. Rapidly intensifying hurricanes, devastating floods, and withering droughts. This is not just about the weather. This is about people. Many Africans are losing their lives while countless more have lost their homes, farms, and businesses. And as we continue to heat and warm the planet, the situation in Africa continues to get worse. Cyclone Idai was one of the worst cyclones to affect the African continent, ripping apart and flooding large parts of Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The strong winds and heavy rainfall left more than 1,300 people dead, and many more were recorded as missing. It also left an economic crisis. Cyclone Kenneth arrived, destroying areas of northern Madagascar, northern Mozambique, southern Tanzania, Malawi, and tropical cyclone Eloise caused massive destruction with strong winds, heavy rains, and severe flooding in areas of Madagascar, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and South Africa, affecting more than 467,000 people in January 2021. Last year, the water levels of Lake Victoria rose as a result of heavy rainfall in East Africa. The water level rose to a record 13.42 meters, surpassing the 13.41 meter mark recorded in 1964. Homes were flooded, farms were washed away, people were displaced, toilets were submerged, leading to a water and food crisis. The rising water levels led to the displacement of over 200,000 people in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. East Africa was invaded by swarms of locusts brought on by heavy rainfall and abnormally warm temperatures. The locusts ate everything in their path. Crops were devoured, threatening the availability of food for the people in the region. And last year in September, massive flooding in Sudan killed nearly 100 people and made thousands homeless. The Nile regularly bursts its banks and farmers rely on the flood waters to create fertile land. But people who live along the Nile say they had never seen nor experienced anything like the extent of last year's flooding. And this year, thousands of homes have been damaged in Sudan, and many streets were flooded with water after torrential rains caused heavy flooding. Southern parts of Africa have experienced terrible droughts that are leading to food insecurity and water scarcity. The water levels of Zambezi River, Lake Chad, Victoria Falls are lower than they have been for decades. Lake Chad specifically has shrunk to a tenth of its original size in just 50 years. The 2018 to 2021 Southern African drought is an ongoing period of drought taking place in Southern Africa, and it is threatening the availability of food in the region. Southern Madagascar is currently experiencing its worst hunger crisis in years, and this is because of droughts. Locusts have become survival for many people, and at least 1 million people are facing starvation as the situation worsens. Over 5 years of drought in countries like Somalia have left almost half of the population with little to eat or drink, and half of Nigeria has no access to water. According to Oxfam, 12 million people in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia are in dire need of food, but with the rising climate-related disasters, this will only get worse. Severe and intense droughts have dried crops, water sources, and wiped out livestock. The droughts and floods have left nothing behind for the people, nothing except for pain, agony, suffering, starvation, and death. I became a climate activist in 2019 to spread awareness of these facts. At first, I did this at home in Kampala. I stood by the side of busy roads every week protesting, but no one paid much attention. That was until I started getting more and more likes and comments on my social media. Other activists from around the world were sharing the photos and videos of me protesting on the streets. Then others started noticing, not just other youth climate activists, but other activists and even journalists were seeing my posts. Eventually, I was invited to attend international summits in New York, Madrid, and the World Economic Forum in Davos. At these summits, I was often one of the very few African youth representatives. I was there, I thought, to spread the word about the climate destruction I was seeing in my country, about the experiences of people on the front lines of the climate crisis. But I was ignored. At Davos, when I had an opportunity to speak at a press conference with fellow friends, literally cut out of the picture on their article from the composition, something that would catch. Sorry, I think my video stopped, but I'll go again. At Davos, when I had an opportunity to speak at a press conference with fellow Fridays for Future activists from Europe, I was literally cut out of the picture. The Associated Press cropped me from the picture on their article from the press conference, and they failed to mention I was there at all in the article. Someone cropped me out because they wanted a photo with a nice composition, something that would catch people's eyes in the brief second they scrolled past it online. But by doing this, they didn't just crop me out. They cropped a whole continent. The suffering African people are going through has been ignored for years. Africa is warming faster than the global average and facing extreme weather events quicker. We are also less prepared to deal with the damage than developed countries. The world's media pays attention to the climate crisis when rich countries are hit by extreme weather. They should, of course. But the devastation in countries like mine is largely ignored on the world stage. These inequalities lie deep in the media and in culture. And technologies that do not address these inequalities will only enhance them, furthering climate injustice for people like me. Social media has helped me spread my message, but it has also hurt me. I have often received hate online just for raising my voice. Social media can be a difficult place, especially for Black people, but we cannot allow our voices to be silenced. And it's not just other people that can silence our voices. Last year, it was discovered that an algorithm on Twitter designed to optimize photo previews was actually cropping out Black faces in favor of white ones. Technological justice is climate justice. African people and people from the places most affected by the climate crisis need their demands to be heard. Africa needs its climate impacts to be recognized. We need people to see the death, destruction, hunger, and thirst that the climate crisis is causing. We need people to be able to hear our calls for major polluters to cut emissions and our need for finance to fund the transition to clean energy here. Money still pours into Africa from governments and corporations in rich countries. not for renewables, but to build new fossil fuel infrastructure. Instead, we need money to scale renewables, to invest in nature and other climate solutions. Solutions also need to empower the marginalized people within our societies. The climate crisis disproportionately affects women and girls. They face increasing workloads, looking after families, and even increased domestic violence and child marriages as a result of extreme weather. Some solutions, such as educating girls, can both empower women economically and in their societies to be more resilient to climate destruction, and they can draw down emissions well into the future. The climate crisis is an unequal crisis. It is affecting some people more than the others. We may be facing the same storm, but we are in different boats. Some boats are sinking way faster, other boats are much stronger. Those who are at the front lines of the climate crisis are not on the front pages of the world's newspapers. We need to hear those who are at the front lines of the climate crisis right now. We need technology to be on our side. We need technology to make our stories heard. We cannot be silenced by it because we are suffering from the climate crisis. We cannot eat coal and we cannot drink oil. My future and the future of millions of young people all around the world is in the balance. We need technology to help protect us. We need technology to help protect our future. We need technology to help protect our planet. Thank you.
Timnit, please.
Yeah, that was amazing. So my plan was, because Vanessa has laid it all out with all the statistics and the numbers and the personal experiences, what I wanted to do, I'm gonna remove this self-view, sorry, because I can't, it's so hard for me to look at myself while I'm talking. What I'm gonna do is talk a little bit about the paper we wrote that supposedly got me fired from Google, which part of what we did was connect some of these issues of climate change and environmental racism to a specific type of technology. Before that, I'll just say I'm sitting in the kitchen, and so behind me is a fridge. And so I hope that's okay. And thank you so much for having me at this gathering. So my name is Timnit Gebru, and Timnit means wish in Tigrinya. Tigrinya is a language that is spoken by many people in Ertra, which is a country in the Horn of Africa of maybe 5 or 6 million people. I'm not exactly sure what the numbers are. And it's also spoken in the northern part of Ethiopia in a state called Tigray. And Ethiopia is the second most populous country in Africa. And so my name's Timnit, and so my parents are Eritrean, so I'm Eritrean, of Eritrean descent. And I was born and raised in Addis Ababa, which is the capital city of Ethiopia. So in 1998, I had to leave Ethiopia because of a war that was going on between Ertra, which had gotten its independence from Ethiopia, and Ethiopia. And given that I'm of Eritrean descent, we were in danger of just being kicked out of the country. Many Eritreans were already kicked out of the country. And I had to leave very suddenly. And I came to the US as a refugee. So I had a refugee trial. It's a long story. So I had political asylum in the US. fast forward to now, 2020, there is a war that was announced in Ethiopia in November 2020. And similar actors are involved, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and in the northern part of Tigray, I mean in Tigray in general, the northern part of Ethiopia is under a lot of duress right now, and it's being decimated. Women are being sexually assaulted, crops are being burnt, and there is a lot of conflict going on. And so, as Vanessa mentioned, that part of the world has been infested by locusts. So there was a locust invasion already before this conflict started. So I got fired from Google in December 2020. And in November 2020, all that was on my mind, in addition to the election in the United States, which I was worried that Donald Trump would win again. As we know, there's a rise in authoritarian governments, which is also related to how we can address climate change. So in November 2020, all that was in my brain was PTSD. War was announced. And I was remembering what happened in 1998, and I was just thinking, I can't believe this is happening, and what can I do? What can we do? One thing that I saw, one of the many things that I saw, was the role of social media platforms. Social media platforms have been shown to exacerbate conflict in countries like Myanmar and various other places. But it didn't really hit me until I saw with my own eyes what was happening. Fake news was completely, and disinformation was completely going unfettered. Hate speech, genocidal speech was going completely unfettered. So companies like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were operating in Ethiopia and Eritrea and people could post in those languages. But the content moderation is really not paid attention to the same way they would, let's say, pay attention to it if it was in the US. So this was becoming increasingly clear to me. And so, for instance, there are people try various mechanisms to do, let's, for instance, say hate speech detection or toxicity detection. And they use various forms of language technology, right? So right now, one of the biggest, most popular forms of language technology that is used for these kinds of things, for instance, hate speech detection, let's say, is large language models. So these large language models are a type of language technology that is trained mostly on lots and lots of text on the internet, on the web. And so then they can be used for a whole bunch of things. So going back to hate speech detection, when you look at language technology, so like I said, my name is Tigrinya, right? In Tigrinya, Timnit Gebru. You don't even, there isn't really language technology for Tigrinya, right? Or many of the other many African languages that people speak. On the other hand, I saw VPs, Turing Award winners. So the Turing Award is like a Nobel Prize for artificial intelligence, right? Turing Award winners such as Jan LeCun, who was VP at Facebook, saying that, that we shouldn't really blame Facebook for a lot of conflicts or things that we see because, for instance, 94% of hate speech is automatically taken down by Facebook. I knew that was not true because for some languages, they don't even have any language technology, let alone automatically take down hate speech. So that comment in and of itself, to me, showed that he was making an assumption that there were certain countries and populations that were considered important. because in his mind, there are certain languages for which they have language technology, which are used to automatically take down hate speech. So this was the climate when I wrote this paper that supposedly got me fired. So this paper was called "On the Dangers of Stochastic Parrots, Can Language Models Get Too Big?" So we were talking about the potential dangers of these large language models, which is a type of language technology. What does large mean? Large means it uses lots and lots of data. It uses lots and lots of computation power. So we talked about a number of the risks, because what we saw was the tech companies were in a rush to develop these larger and larger language models. So, so going back to social media companies and unfettered hate speech, what kind of speech do you see in social media companies? You see the dominant worldview. You see the dominant world languages. You see marginalized voices, even more marginalized. So we cite in our paper works that show that, for instance, people who issue death threats on social media companies because of the moderation practices, their accounts are not shut down, but the people who are recipients of the death threats are pushed out, are bullied off of these media platforms. So you have this toxic language that's generated in these social media platforms. Why am I mentioning this? Because this data that's generated in these platforms is then used as training data in large language models. So whose view is represented? Whose expressions are represented, and who are these large language models benefiting versus who are they hurting? So obviously the costs and benefits don't accrue to the same people. Similar to the costs and benefits of climate change, obviously nobody's really in the world eventually going to benefit from climate change, but currently, as Vanessa mentioned, the people who are not responsible for the emissions of that are causing our catastrophe are the people who are most being harmed by it. And specifically in large language models, the people who are not benefiting from the from the large language model technology are the people who are being most harmed by it. Its negative consequences. So one of the negative consequences is environmental racism. So these large language models require lots of compute. Lots of compute means lots of energy, lots of data centers. Now, people at Google were extremely upset by this insinuation that using lots of resources and large data centers was really bad, because they said, oh no, but we're going to be carbon neutral. We have 100%, we're carbon neutral, so it doesn't matter. We can use as large data centers as we want. So you shouldn't say this is contributing to the environmental racism. But our argument is that regardless of, even if it's renewable energy, if you are using large data centers, you're still killing lots of trees. We give examples in our paper. You can't just assume that you can use as large resources as you want because they're renewable, right? And then still, whose resources are destroyed to create technology for whom is still not, again, accruing to the same people. We give examples, like, for instance, in our paper, we talked about Sudan, which is seeing incredible levels of flooding because of the climate catastrophe. But when you look at large language models, they're not created to benefit speakers of Sudanese Arabic. So then what happens? These social media platforms, again, are causing lots of conflict, and fueling the conflict that is also being exacerbated because of the climate catastrophe. Whatever underlying issues you have, so like I said, I'm Eritrean, of Eritrean descent, grew up in Ethiopia, there were already underlying issues. When you have less and less arable land, less and less resources, there are more and more conflicts that arise, as we are seeing right now. These conflicts get exacerbated by these social media companies that are based in the US that are not benefiting the groups of people who are being affected by the conflict. Anything they do, content moderation, hate speech detection, etc., that they use large language models for, is not helping the people that are being affected by the conflict. Then these people try to immigrate, like I did. I was a refugee. And you see that the world is closing its borders to refugees. I believe that migration is a human right. If you look at Eritreans, there is, for example, a documentary called The Sound of Torture on the plight of Eritrean refugees. They drown in boats, right? European companies turn the boats back. They get kidnapped in the Sinai and other places and tortured for ransom. It was very difficult for me to watch these kinds of documentaries, but that's what's happening. So once again, these social media companies exacerbate the conflict, which is exacerbated because of climate change, and large language models, like the technology that these social media companies use to do content moderation or other things, don't benefit these groups of people that I'm talking about. In turn, so this migration happens. Let's say you make it to the European countries or the US like I did. What happens? You come into the country, you face racism, sexism, xenophobia, and then these countries in turn say, oh, we're having too many refugees. There's the rise of authoritarianism. Then these views then become reflected in social media. Because like I said, what the discourse that you see online is the dominant hegemonic view. So then these extremist views go into the social media platforms, and that is once again used as training data for these large language models, which again, not only don't benefit the groups of people that are being harmed, but further disenfranchise them. So of course, this is the kind of stuff I wrote about. And I was silenced in one of the most, horrible ways, which is they fired me when I said I wouldn't retract the paper without a conversation. And this form of silencing is very common, right? And so as Vanessa mentioned, if we say we care about something like climate change, but we're not listening to the people at the forefront, we're explaining it's exploitation. That's why there is a huge connection between colonialism and what we're talking about in terms of climate change, right? So for instance, the same way that Vanessa was cropped out of these images, and then they said, all the journalists were saying it wasn't done on purpose, right? I was constantly left off of emails at Google, constantly. And one time I sent them an article about Vanessa being cropped out of these news articles. And I said, you see, you say you care about racism, sexism, bias, etc., and you're silencing my voice. You're constantly leaving me off of emails, etc. And just like they said to Vanessa that they're not doing it on purpose, you're constantly telling me that you're not doing this on purpose and I'm supposed to be okay with what you're doing. So even though it seems that discrimination and climate change might not be connected, or technology and climate change might not be connected, I think that they are intricately connected starting with the colonial history, right? Of which is what set who benefits and who pays the cost. And with that, I will stop right here.
Thank you, Vanessa and Timnit, for your insights. That was a lot to take in. I think for many people, this comes like a new connection. Please, before we start with the conversation between the two of you, we both forgot to describe ourselves for
Yes, we did.
for the audience that that needs a description. We do this because we want to be accessible also for people that have some how you call that, side impairabilities. So my name is Lorena. I'm a Spanish white woman. I have dark hair. I'm barefoot here, and I have a pink skirt and a black top.
My name is Tembi Wolf, and I have a big afro. And today I'm wearing a striped top that's pink and blue and black and white.
Looks lovely. So we will now have a conversation, and we will be open for questions from 19 hours on CST. So it's about 6:45 right now here in Hamburg. Vanessa, Timnit, please feel free to address each other directly. If you want to just jump into a specific part of what each other of you said. We want to have this as a lively conversation and a very interactive conversation between the two of you. But of course, we also have prepared questions. So,
I was mostly addressing what Vanessa said. So, I mean, I don't know if Vanessa has a few words, but I'm okay to start with the prepared questions too.
Yeah, just to say that there's a lot to learn from everything you said, and I think it was really powerful, and I love what you really talked about the language and how the present technologies are not able to translate other languages, and I have seen that because it's hard, for some activists to tell their stories in their languages, because even if, for example, they tweet their languages, other people won't be able to understand what they're saying. Yeah, so I think it was really powerful. And yeah, just to add, when voices are being, erased, it's always made to look like they're not doing it on purpose, like you said, and yet it's obvious that this is being done on purpose. So the voices are not listened to, and I'm glad that you called Google out for continuously leaving you out of the emails and just sharing that the article with them to show the exact example of what happened to me, and it's the same thing that they are doing, and yet they are talking about inclusion and diversity. Yeah.
can I ask on that?
I think that's. Oh, go ahead.
Because that's what unites both of your stories. You experience injustice and erasure in your fields of work, and went public, went to Twitter and social media, and thus managed to increase your visibility even more. How did you turn the tables? What was the factor, the key factor about that?
I can say for me, the first important thing was for me to realize that it was not in my head. And I'm actually extremely impressed with Vanessa that she felt it, and she immediately went and told her story and did not back down. Because for me, you know, I've been in the tech industry for 16 years now. And initially, when I was working, I was going crazy because I was like, is this in my head? Am I being sensitive? Is it real? So coming to a point where I knew that it was not in my head, regardless of what people said, was very important. And I think it's very important when you see other people speaking up and going public to validate their experiences and say, this is not in your head, this is a larger problem, and good for you for for showing up and saying that this is a larger problem and it's not in your head. And for me, I had to build a larger coalition of following around me, you know, through a lot of other advocacy, Black NAI, and everything else I did, to feel confident that I'll have a group of people behind me and not completely be shut down. Because many women before me have said what I tried to say, and they've been completely shut down, their careers destroyed, and their lives destroyed. So that to turn the tables, we have to make sure that each person who comes forward and says this does not have the fate of being deplatformed, their careers and their lives being destroyed.
And Timnit,
Yeah,
sorry. No, please go, Vanessa.
Sorry.
No,
I really agree with that. It's just important that when someone comes up and speaks against something, for example, if my own personal experience, the moment I saw that article and that picture, I just wanted to know why I had been cropped out. And I think my very first tweet was that question, why have I been cropped out? And yet I was in this picture. And it wasn't just me speaking up and asking that question. It was the rest of the people from different parts of the world who came up and, you know, were so supportive and asking the same question, because probably if they hadn't come up to give that support, probably it would have just passed like that and nothing would have happened, and the world wouldn't have found out what was happening, especially with the climate movement and the deeper issues of environmental racism, of discrimination. So it's important to have that support when someone comes up and, you know, speaks up against any kind of injustice.
Timnit, are you maybe able to answer that question? Vanessa said earlier that it's not on purpose that those voices of marginalized people are silenced. Can you provide an answer as to why those voices are silenced by or in tech?
I think it is, well, we can start with, you know, let me give you an example. The Maori people, you know, I tweeted an article yesterday about the Maori, some people in that group having their own, they created their own data set for the language to create a speech-to-text translation and create various language technology. And they guarded their data very carefully because they have the history of colonization. And there was a quote that said, you know, they beat our grandparents, they beat it out of us, the language out of us, and now they want to take our language and they want to sell it to us as a service. And so somebody on Twitter was like, who is they? That sounds so racist. So it's not the beating out of us, you know, our own language that they caught on, is the complaint that they, quote unquote, did this. And they're like, oh, that's racist. For me, this summarizes exactly the kinds of things I was going through at Google, right? I complain about harassment. I complain about very grave things, but they don't like my tone, the way I did it. I sound a bit, you know, accusatory. And so this is a very well-known phenomenon, right? And it happens when you have years and years and years of injustice in certain groups of people who are used to being in power and who don't feel comfortable when their power is called out and what they're doing because of the fact that they have that power is called out. And they can talk about, you know, being civil or other things, right? And so I think this is, you know, so historically, these things were being done on purpose for hundreds of years. And now we're in this spot because of this history. There are certain narratives and certain groups that have dominance and have power. And because they don't learn about this history or this reality, they feel like they're not perpetrators. They feel like they're doing something just fine. So you come along and you know, question that narrative, and their first, you know, reflex is to attack you. Similar to how they did Vanessa. Like, how dare you attack me for, you know, even that question that she tweeted, why am I cropped out? How dare you pay attention to that? You're not supposed to do that, right? You're supposed to be in your place. So in fact, actually in the American contest, there is this book, this short paper called The Abuse and Misogyny Playbook. The Abuse and Misogyny Playbook that some academics wrote to talk about this playbook. So this is the gaslighting part of the playbook. So what we experience, the gaslighting, is part of a playbook. It's a way to make you feel like what you're experiencing is not real.
When we try to put this also in the context of colonization in tech, one of the things that strike me the most is precisely how we in the Western cultures understand technology. This is a very precise image in our heads when we talk about technology. However, Vanessa, you seem to have a rather broader idea of technology when you use that word. What do you mean when you talk about clean technologies, for instance? You were addressing it a bit in your input. Could you please explain a bit more when you were talking about
Clean technologies?
Yeah, clean technologies and education as a technology. Could you explain what you understand when you talk about technology? You seem to have a broader understanding, a very own definition of what technology is, that it sort of stands in contrast with the concept that we have in the Occident, in the West, of what a technology is.
Yeah, I think that technology really comes in different ways. And many times when people talk about technology, we think about things like rocket science, out of space things. But I think that there are things that we can do right now that can be our next, shiny technological solutions, especially for the climate crisis. And I can talk about educating girls as one of the next technological solutions that we have for the climate crisis. Project Drawdown lists 100 things that we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and ranked number 5 is educating girls and family planning. So who can expect educating girls to actually be a climate solution? But here I am to tell you that educating girls can be the next, best or the next technological solution that we need. Why? This is a solution that is going to reduce already existing inequalities in our societies that many girls, that many women face. And it's also a solution that is going to build resilience of individuals, resilience of families, and resilience of communities. And thirdly, a solution that is going to reduce emissions all at the same time. When we talk about, the climate crisis, we see many times leaders talk about, solutions that need so much development, so much research, and we don't even know when they are going to, be implemented. But this is a solution that can be implemented right now. This is a solution that doesn't, benefit just the girl or the woman who is empowered. It is a solution that gives all of us a lifeline.
talking about what we consider to be technology, Vanessa, we often don't talk about at what cost technology comes. The current technologies running with artificial intelligence require an exploitation of diverse resources, non-artificial resources. And these forms of exploitations are called extraction. Maybe you can talk a bit about what that extraction means for your part of the world, the part of the world your work is based in, about what the tech industry in the West means for broadening our concept of extraction, how it shapes the environment in your country.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, it's important to understand why this technology is being created or why this technology is being put in place. Who is in the place of benefiting this technology? Some of the things that, you know, we see being, I would say, created or formed or manufactured, I think I should use that, in global north countries, we end up seeing them in our countries probably years later. So those who are, the technology is being put in place or manufactured, for lack of a better word, for specific communities, for specific countries, for specific individuals. However, the resources to create some of this technology comes from communities like ours, comes from countries like ours. And sometimes it means child labor in some communities. Sometimes it means cutting down of forests in some communities. Sometimes it means destruction of biodiversity or wildlife habitats in communities like ours. It means encroachment on indigenous people's lands for the sake of, you know, a few people to benefit from this technology. So as the smaller, you know, portion or percentage of the world is benefiting from that technology now, which we may get to see 20 years later, we are actually experiencing the impacts of how that technology is put in place, even without us seeing it in our communities. So this is what makes us talk about the climate injustices. Climate injustice is a very, you know, wide topic. It goes from destruction of wildlife habitats, destruction of ecosystems, encroachment and extraction of indigenous lands. It goes to digging up and burning of fossil fuels. Speak of fossil fuels, we see the digging up and burning of fossil fuels in, you know, in African countries. But who is benefiting from all that oil that is being dug and burnt in our countries? It is not us. It is people in rich countries. It is people from wealthier countries. It is people from the global north. So as technology is being created or put in place, it's important to note that those who are not benefiting from that technology are facing the impacts of the process of creating that technology, while those who are benefiting are riding on a smooth, I don't know, like a smooth bike or something like that. So those who are benefiting, they're not seeing the impacts. And those who are not benefiting or even have no access to this technology, we are seeing the impacts. This is what makes technological justice climate justice. So if there is technological injustice, then we have climate injustice. I think we don't need technology that benefits a few people. We need technology that is going to ensure protection of the people and protection of the planet.
Timnit, before you joined Google's ethical AI section, I read that you were supposed to start an AI project for Google in Ghana. And apparently you were not very happy about how that went down. So maybe maybe you want to talk about that, or maybe like in a broader sense.
Wow.
Maybe,
okay.
maybe
well,
in a
yes.
broader sense, we're
I was
talking
not
about
happy.
Misconceptions about how new technologies, how AI plays into life in Africa, on the continent. Maybe you can talk about the misconceptions that we have there, like the things that go wrong.
Without going into so much detail,
of course,
I wanted to, there's a lot, there is a lot. But, you know, so one of the things I was thinking about is the brain drain, right? Like, for instance, people like me, that's a brain drain. I had to leave. I didn't have a choice. It's not like I left home wanting to leave home. I had to get out. So I was basically exiled. And there are generations of people like that. So if you see, I mean, at the Tokyo Olympics, I don't remember which competition it was, running, I don't know if it was like 10,000 meters, 15,000, I'm not exactly sure. But all three medalists were Ethiopian born, all three. The first one, Sifan, she's Oromo, which is the largest ethnic group in Ethiopia. And she was running, I believe, for the Netherlands. The second one was running for, I believe, Bahrain. The third one is from Tigray, is running for Ethiopia, but her region is completely being decimated right now, right? She can't talk to her family because it's under a communication blockade. So this is the branding. This is generations of exile and everything we go through. And it's all connected, right? All of the conversations we're having right now are connected to this. So one of the things I wanted to work on is how to provide opportunities that I have to people who are there without them having to leave. And one of the ways in which I saw that was that there are lots of resources at Google. Google has a lot of resources. Google pays people, a certain amount of money. So why is it that only certain groups of people get to benefit from that? So I thought that, perhaps having an office in the African continent, hiring people from there would also benefit people, having technological jobs that they don't get to have without leaving the country, and B, maybe encourage them to work on technological solutions or works that are relevant to their own communities. But what I saw is that, this is what I'm going to say about it, and I've sent lots of emails about this, is that they wanted the idea of having an office in Africa. They wanted the idea, right? Just like they wanted the idea of me being at Google. They wanted the idea. They didn't want the reality. And they didn't actually care about having that office in Africa. They wanted it such that they could say, oh yeah, we're doing AI for good. We're all the PR. Here is what's happening in Africa. The reality was very, very different. And it was just extremely painful. But yeah, so that was my experience with that. And really, that's the experience I see with many large tech companies doing this, right? They generally, it's kind of, what is it, like, not nice language to say, oh, we have diversity, we care about the environment, we have an Africa office, right? And so that's kind of the reality. And if you are too close to saying what they don't want you to say, you're out, in the most disrespectful way, like they did to me. So that's from the get-go, when I was joining Google, that's what I saw. And I didn't have a good feeling about going there from day one. And I only decided to go there when my, now also fired former co-lead said, asked me if I wanted to co-lead the ethical AI team with her.
We only have 5 minutes. This has been such a wonderful conversation, but if there's someone here in the audience, both on-site or offline or online, that wants to place a question, please do it now. And put yourself in front of that microphone. You don't need to take off your mask. It's a very powerful microphone. If not, let's keep with the conversation. This last 5 minutes, we did get one question, I think, through.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask? Because
Sure.
You have it in front of you.
There's an activist question for you, Vanessa, actually. And the question is, as a young activist, what advice would you give to other young people who do not understand what climate change is all about? Young people who need to make a living in impoverished areas, who do not understand that perhaps sometimes their actions are detrimental to the environment.
Yeah, thank you so much. In my journey of activism, I've done a lot of research, and I've tried to teach myself many things about the climate crisis. I did business administration, so I had no idea about anything that was about the climate or the environment. So I did a lot of research and reading lots of articles, and also seeing the work of different activists who are already protesting and who had more knowledge about that. But I think what we really need is for climate education to be introduced in schools, to be added to school curriculums, so that young people get the knowledge of the climate crisis, so that young people understand their connection with nature, and how they can use their voices to speak up and demand for a present and a future that is healthy, that is clean for all of us. So climate education is really key to help many young people understand the different environmental issues. But for those who are not able to get that from school, and you can get it from social media, I would really recommend following the work of different activists who are who have been speaking up, who have been demanding for climate justice, and just learn from them, and just learn from some of the articles that they share. There is also a lot of information in those articles. And if you would like to just join a specific group, that different Fridays for Future, I would say, groups in different parts of the world, so you can easily connect with Fridays for Future in your country. It can be Rise Up movement in Uganda. You can try and connect with the easiest groups that you can reach out to that are doing environmental work, so you can add your voice to demanding for climate justice. And of course, as individuals, we have a responsibility for the planet, but it's also important to note that we are in the climate crisis because of the fossil fuel industry. We are in the climate crisis because of the continuous burning of coal, oil, so-called natural gas, by our governments. So what we really want is system change. Some people cannot live as sustainable as they want because of of the systems that they are in their countries. So we need systems that ensure that we do not have fossil fuels, that ensure that we have smart or cleaner or green cities, and transportation, name it, so people can easily live sustainably.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much.
And also thank you to Martha from Cape Town for the question. I forgot to mention that.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Martha. We are very German, and this means that time is over, and we would have loved to give you 10 seconds for the last words, but we probably are not able to do that. A bit. Yes, I'm getting some Spanish extra time. Yes. We need system change, as you were saying, Vanessa. So Vanessa and Timnit, as the last words from both of you, what does it take to change the thinking behind the technologies that we build and the policies that we make? I know it's a very big question and it's not much time, but just one aspect, one dimension that you would like to stress, although you have already a lot.
I don't have much to add to what Vanessa beautifully put, but I'll say that it's very important to give power to the people, to the voiceless people, because this is what got us here in the first place, right? Indigenous communities have been disenfranchised for hundreds of years in the name of development, and then when they try to fight it, they're disenfranchised. So it's very important to to pass the mic and to give power to the people and change systems, as Vanessa was saying.
Vanessa?
Yeah, I think I really agree with that as well. It's important to listen to those from the most affected areas because every activist has a story to tell and every story has a solution to give and every solution has a life to change. So if we are talking about climate justice, then it has to include everyone. Thank you.
So no solutions without listening first. Technological justice is climate justice. Wow. Timnit, Vanessa, many thanks for sharing your wisdom and insights with us. And many thanks for your work. I've learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.